So a while back, I checked out a video that explained the cost of the MJOLNIR armor, and it was installation did an amazing job of explaining it, like how much money goes into it by breaking it down, what like it's made out of, where it's made, how long it takes to process, and if it's by handcraft or is it industrial production, and and also like taking into account like this is like several centuries down the road, so the price could be a little bit different compared to now. And then it came out to around, if we were talking about present time value, it would come out to about $125 million. And what's shocking to me is he did state in the video saying like it's $125 million for a non-functioning one, which means it's just a display, like it's just armor that's gonna stand there. You can't use it, you can't move or anything like that. And then on top of that, we saw MJOLNIR armor again, like the creation of it and how it can only be used by augmented individuals in the movie Halo: The Fall of Reach. Because I still remember like they showed a small clip from what Halsey was showing. Oh, by the way, spoiler if you haven't seen Halo: The Fall of Reach. What happened was she showed a like video clip of a non-augmented individual wearing the armor, and just by like moving his hand, the whole thing, the whole reaction, the reactive like a reflex or reactive like system in the MJOLNIR armor broke literally all his bones, and like it tore his muscles, and he died from from the spasms or something like that. So it was really scary. But now we're gonna see what 10 facts you may not know about the MJOLNIR armor. Maybe some of them I already know, or maybe I already seen in like past videos, and maybe some that will just completely surprise me. Who knows? But like I said, Installation is the expert here, and also the credit of this video goes to him. So Installation, if you're watching this, hey man, well done. So without anything else, let's get into it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today here's another video on 10 things you might or might not have known about things in Halo. In the previous video we looked at 10 things you might or might not have known about the Spartan 2s, and today we continue.
Oh, I haven't seen that video yet, but
and look at
I didn't know that was the
chronological
chronological order, so my
bad. Let me know in
bad.
the comments at the end of the video on how many of them you already knew, and leave suggestions on what you want me to cover next.
Dude, that scene is still crazy.
In the meantime,
Master
sit
Chief
back
just
and
taking a
relax.
bomb like that
The
and just
lore
diving into
aficionados will enjoy
space.
this video as just a general retelling of some deep lore, and for those of you who don't know these facts, you're due an education. So, let's roll the intro.
Our Installation, what 10 facts can you tell us about the MJOLNIR armor?
The Mark 1, Mark 2 and Mark 3 platforms are not MJOLNIR. I feel like I need to elaborate on this one significantly. So, in truth, there were actually a Mark 1, Mark 2 and Mark 3 MJOLNIR
Okay, so I didn't know
platform, but
that.
they were early prototype versions of the armor that were completely pre-production, and ultimately served as the primary testbed for numerous technologies that Dr. Halsey was employing to develop a finished article of MJOLNIR powered assault armor. These experimental suits ranged from 2515 to 2525, and while bulky and cumbersome to use and having to be tied to an external power supply, the suits did pioneer a lot of innovative technologies in regards to artificial muscles, embedded computers, and software control systems. When most people think about the Mark 1, Mark 2 and Mark 3 platforms, they think about the large exosuits that predated
That is so
Project
cool.
MJOLNIR
I mean, it
entirely,
looks cool too.
and these were not MJOLNIR.
A
They were
big
platforms
turret just
from a
like sitting
program
here
called
like
Project Frontier,
War
which was
Machine in the
earliest and
Avengers.
longest-lived military exoskeleton project, with the earliest platforms developed in 2166, predating Halsey's platforms by nearly 4 centuries. Only the latter Mark III fronting was
Cyclops
adapted
unit.
to finally become the Cyclops, a powerful pilotable mech suit that was used aboard the Spirit of Fire.
That looks like something
As a
from
side note,
Avatar.
it's worth noting that MJOLNIR is not the only powered exoskeleton program in development with the UNSC over the entirety of the huge
Oh yeah, isn't that the
Covenant War.
Mantis?
Fronting was another such example, as was Project Yggdrasil, which created the Mark 1 and Mark 2 armor defense systems, or more specifically the prototype suit. And then, as I've covered in a more recent lore video,
Sergeant Major
there
Johnson.
was the Orion Exoframe Load Carrier, which was a form of armor developed specifically for the Orion Super Soldier program. Many of these programs were either retroactively included into the line of MJOLNIR platforms or became their own merged multi-role programs that gave birth to platforms like the Mantis and the Colossus.
Used by gods.
MJOLNIR's name relates to the fact that it cannot be wielded by a normal human being, in similar vein to the mythological application of the word Mjolnir in regards to the hammer of the gods. This mighty weapon of war wielded most notably by the god Thor was so heavy and powerful a weapon that only Thor could actually pick it up and wield it. While others could pick up the Mjolnir, they couldn't necessarily use it due to its immense weight. Relating this back to Halo, when Mjolnir powered assault armor was first sent off to be assessed for production by the Office of Naval Intelligence, they used a Marine in order to activate the armor for the first time and move it. However, Mjolnir responded
this is what I was talking about,
so
the Halo The Fall of Reach,
that it broke the bones of the man's arm. The pain-induced spasms that he then experienced were magnified and amplified by the Mjolnir powered assault armor, causing uncontrollable tremors and shaking, which further damaged his arm, causing a feedback loop whereby, had the armor not have been shut off, it would have killed him. Interestingly enough, Halsey does detail in her journal that she did in fact have certain mechanisms built into this test prototype to limit how much power and speed the Mjolnir armor output, but somebody turned them off before testing. It would appear that that particular feature of Mjolnir powered assault armor was phased out entirely once it was fully approved, leaving only the Spartans, godlike human beings, capable of wielding it.
That's a big price. Yeah, we already saw that video. 125 mil, man.
Expensive as hell. Though a price tag is never explicitly put on a single platform of Mjolnir powered assault armor, it is generally quoted that a single suit of Mjolnir costs approximately the same as a small starship. Again, this is a very generic term, because by small starship do they mean frigates of the UNSC, or do they mean small civilian class starships? In which case, diplomatic vessels like the Han that Dr. Halsey used in order to identify some of the early candidates for the Spartan program could be classed as a small starship. So it's never explicitly stated what end of the spectrum they're relating to small starship. But what is known is that the single most expensive aspect of the Mjolnir powered assault armor is its energy supply, the micro nuclear fusion power pack in the backpack, which, while being a significant technological breakthrough, is also prohibitively expensive.
Early Mjolnir didn't look like Mjolnir.
The very first Mark IV prototype didn't look like Mjolnir much at all. After years of development, Dr. Halsey finally developed a finished platform of pre-production Mjolnir powered assault armor that she sent off for assessment by the Office of Naval Intelligence. And this platform didn't actually bear many of the key characteristics of what the Mjolnir Mark IV platform would ultimately become. The shape, form and ergonomics of the suit as a whole more closely represented that of the Orion exoframe loader, with some very telling signs of ODST and Marine battle armor thrown in for good measure. The eerie thing about this particular design, however, is that upon looking at it, you can see a lot of inspirations for the more modern Keystone Gen 3 platform than any other previous Mjolnir platform itself. The helmet has the much more prominent double vents system, the two vents on the front of the mouthpiece as well as the two on the side of the cheeks. The forearm and bicep armor looks much more akin to the Mark VII Gen 3 arms than any other platform. And even the abdominals, the waist armor and the gloves seem to mimic permutations of the Gen 3 platform that we've already seen in application. But when one thinks about it, it's hardly surprising given that the Gen 2 platform moved away from a lot of the design ethos of the Gen 1 platform. And the Gen 1 platform was headed by Dr. Halsey, while the Gen 2 platform was subcontracted out to numerous corporate contractors, resulting in a much larger diversification of innate styles. With Halsey's return to
just
the
like
Mjolnir
different
platform
designs
for the Gen
along
3,
the way.
It's hardly surprising that some of those older inspirations made their way back in to the newer platform.
Okay. Most Mjolnir platforms released a few months apart.
Mjolnir's development cycle accelerated.
That sounds really
dramatically
expensive.
through the war. Work on the very first platform of Mjolnir powered assault armor started in 2511. the first finished prototype wasn't ready for review until 2525. Later that year, the first Mark IV platforms were ready for the Spartans to suit up. Small iterations were made to the Mark IV platform during the subsequent decades, but the next clear platform, being the Mark V platform, wasn't released until 2552. And while yes, the Mark V-B platform existed marginally before this, the Mark V-B is classed as a form of subcategorization of the marked platforms. The Mark V platform was only in service for a few months before it was entirely supplanted by the Mark VI platform. A handful of Mark VII testbeds were produced around the same time, but were ultimately supplanted by the Gen 2 platform, which, as previously mentioned, was a massive diversification in form and function, with dozens of new variants being released in a very short space of time. The next from the ground up rework of the platform entirely was the release of the Gen 3 platform, which, as we know, was reopened in 2558 by Dr. Halsey. But the very fact that 3 of the 4 original marks for Mjolnir Powered Assault Armor all happened in the final year of the Human Covenant War is definitely a remarkable point, especially considering the immense innovations that were made across those 3 platforms.
Mjolnir had a radioactive backpack. Oh yeah, the nuclear powered.
The micro-nuclear fusion power pack is the single most expensive
basically the battery
component
of the armor.
The Mjolnir platform. However, the earliest platforms of Mjolnir did not have a fusion power plant. The earliest versions of Mjolnir had a nuclear fission power pack. Fusion is arguably a cleaner, more powerful, and all-around safer form of energy.
Now we're getting
Fusing
chemistry in here.
isotopes
That's
of
not my.
hydrogen together
That's not
at
my subject, man. I can't do
extraordinarily
that.
high pressures and temperatures to generate energy, which is then siphoned off and converted into usable energy by a process known as electrostatic direct energy conversion. Altogether, if anything was to go wrong with the fusion power pack or the fusion reaction as a whole, the reaction would simply stop happening and the armor would power down. Fission is a slightly different beast. Nuclear fission is when heavy atoms are split, releasing huge amounts of energy but also creating radioactive byproducts. The immense heat and energy released can then be used to boil water, which can turn turbines which generate electricity. These micro-fission power plants that were powering the earliest platforms of Mjolnir were doing exactly this, but of course if something was to go wrong, you then have a unit on your back which is filled with radioactive material, and a runaway fission reaction could take place, causing basically your own personal version of Chernobyl. Needless to say, these risks were deemed much too high, as simply grazing or damaging the casing that holds the reactor could cause the reactors to go into meltdown. And since these were supposed to be wearable battle armor, and thus be in environments where damage is more than likely, this was most definitely rooted out as soon as humanly possible and replaced with what we now know to be a micro-nuclear fusion power plant.
Mjolnir handles waste. You mean like what?
You don't
Piss
have to
and
worry
feces?
about going to the bathroom in Mjolnir. It's a valid question and it's been brought up a lot, and while we do have definite guaranteed answers to one particular avenue of dealing with waste products, there's one that's subject to interpretation. Spartans, when entering their suits, are catheterized. This means that a small tube is placed in the urethra that Mjolnir then kind of plugs into. Mjolnir then filters the urine of any toxins or pathogens and ultimately purifies the water for recirculation. Going off of only Naomi's quotes in regards to her Mark VII platform, saying, and I quote, "This suit plugs into me into more places than I care to mention," seems to suggest the idea that the suit also effectively has something approximating an enema. In theory, it could even be that the water that is purified for recirculation isn't actually used as drinking water, but as the liquid medium necessary for the performance of an enema. It's also worth noting, however, that Spartans' digestive systems are much more efficient than normal humans' digestive systems, and as such, the food that they eat and how efficient that their digestive and gut bacteria really is, the likelihood is that Spartans don't really need to go number 2 anywhere near as often as normal humans. What the
Okay, that
suit
makes
does
sense.
with this waste once it's been physically extracted, one can only speculate, but in the interests of being a self-contained system, the most logical thing I could imagine was simply route it to the nuclear fusion power pack and carbonize it. I admit it's a much less glamorous aspect of Mjolnir to have to talk about, but hey, it's a valid question, and a valid question needs a valid answer. But again, like I say, in some regards it's left open to interpretation, so I'd be more than willing to hear your opinions on whether this suggestion makes sense or if you have your own.
Mjolnir doubles as a bomb. I bet if it has a nuclear
Every
power
suit
source.
of Mjolnir has a failsafe. It's seemingly only been used once as far as I can tell in all of the books and lore that I've read. But due to the immense technological innovations that went into Mjolnir powered assault armor and the need to keep those technological innovations away from enemy hands, every single suit of Mjolnir has a failsafe built into it which allows any suit's nuclear reactor to be overloaded. Since it's a fusion power pack rather than a fission power pack, the net result isn't a nuclear explosion, but instead an escalating temperature gradient resulting in an explosion. Basically, the fusion power pack overcharges to the point that it incinerates anything within a 10-meter radius, after which the hardened casing finally gives way and explodes, destroying the armor and the occupant inside, thereby denying the enemy of the ability to reverse engineer the technology. Every single Spartan on the field
makes sense.
knows this failsafe code, and at least with earlier platforms there was a panel on the back of the armor where this code could be put in. Although it is at least possible that newer platforms have a command override where Spartans nearby can activate that particular failsafe in the circumstance that one of their brothers or sisters in arms falls in battle. As I previously mentioned, at least to my reading, there seems to be only one situation where this has been applied with the Spartan 2, and that was with Grace aboard the unyielding Hierophant. The worry, especially around the created, is that, in theory, this system could be engaged by created AI and basically turn every Spartan into a small bomb. In truth, it is at least a possibility that that's exactly what the UNSC
So you better be on the good
Leonidas
side
did
of the
to Spartans
AIs.
on board Laconia Station.
Mjolnir's reaction time is nearly instantaneous.
Mjolnir's reaction time is insane. Now we already know that Spartan 2s, Spartan 3s and Spartan 4s have received augmentations to increase their reaction time, giving them on average a 300% increase in reaction time. So I did some long form maths to find out exactly how fast those reaction times could be, and then did the same calculations for Mjolnir, but it needs a little bit of explanation. I'm going to do a more in-depth video surrounding this, fully explaining exactly why I came to the conclusion that I did and reason it out, but basically the punchlines are this. A human's reaction time is governed by what's known as the nerve conduction velocity. When a given stimuli elicits a reactionary response from the human being, this can only happen as fast as the nerve conduction velocity will allow. This is basically how fast electrochemical signals can move along nerve axons. For the average human, that's 150 meters per second at maximum for the central nervous system and around 60 meters per second for innervated muscles. Taking this into account and the distance from the motor cortex in the brain to, say, the bicep being approximately 70 centimeters, reaction time from stimulation to movement can be as little as 21.5 milliseconds for a normal human. Spartans have a 300% increase in this reaction time, leading to a central nervous system velocity of 450 meters per second and an innervated muscle reaction time of 180 meters per second, giving an overall reaction time of 7.16 milliseconds, which is incredibly fast. Where Mjolnir shines through, however, is that Mjolnir is tied directly to the Spartan's physiology by the Spartan neural interface, which is a superconducting filament of transductors built into the midbrain of the Spartan, with particular interface with the motor cortex, meaning that this Spartan neural interface can pick up the neural impulses of movement at their source, convert them to a digital signal, and send them along the superconducting fibers of the Spartan neural interface and then into Mjolnir as fast as those wires will allow the signal to be transmitted. And it just so happens that digital signals move through circuits at 90% the speed of light, or 270,000 meters per second. When you factor that in with the fact that it's got to send those signals then out to a movement interpreter and then out to the respective articulators of, in this case, the bicep. Thought to motion happens in 3.6 nanoseconds. Or basically
now we're going
50
nanoseconds.
million times faster than a Spartan's reaction time. But again, there is some room for error in that calculation, and I will be making a video to extrapolate this further.
I mean,
So
even
stay
if
tuned for
you're
that.
off just a little bit, it's still pretty fast. Armor variants technically shouldn't exist.
And finally, all Mjolnir should look identical. Allow me to explain, before the more recent lore, all Mjolnir platforms looked exactly the same. They were androgynous. They were all green with matte black underplates. They had no external marking, no numbers on the chest, no separate variants, no identifying markers whatsoever. In fact, it was actually a point of mild frustration for the Spartan 2s that they all looked identical to each other, wearing their armor, and yet Dr. Halsey could tell them apart simply based on the way they walked. Obviously, in newer, more recent lore, they've differentiated
Wow.
the unique permutations and identities of specific Spartans by giving them their own variants and their numbers on their chest.
Yeah, this
but
book
it
keeps on
was
coming up,
originally
so I
intended that they
really
would
do
all
have to
look
check it out.
identical. And this may have actually
First
played
sight.
a role in why Spartans,
honest?
or specifically the
Okay,
Master
so I gotta
Chief,
check out this
is called
author
Demon
for those
by
books.
the Covenant. Not just because he could kill endless hordes of their forces, but because they could encounter one Spartan on the battlefield on one colony, realizing that they stood no chance of taking that Spartan down on the colony and thus withdrawing to orbit where they would then orbitally bombard the planet. They would then think that Spartan dead, go to another planet, and find another Spartan that looks identical to the first one, and not being able to differentiate the two Spartans from each other, assumed it was the same Spartan, leading to myths being told about this individual that seemingly defies all odds and keeps coming back from the dead. And one final bonus for you, Mjolnir can operate in the air, on the ground, in space, and, despite what we frequently observe from in-game, underwater as well. Yeah, I know, it's unheard of, right? Mjolnir doesn't just fold in and collapse on itself every single time a Spartan gets their foot wet. Amazing. Anyway, they were 10 things that you might or might not have known about Mjolnir powered assault armor. Let me know in the comments how many of them you knew, and be sure to leave me suggestions on what you want me to cover next. Until then, thanks for watching.
Alright guys, so that was 10 facts about Mjolnir you might not know. So this video was very informative, and I guess he just like basically answered like common questions everyone's been asking about the Mjolnir armor, and he just addressed them. But some of them I did know, like how only Spartans can wear them because they're augmented, and I like how he also used the clip that I mentioned at the beginning of my intro, was like if a non-augmented individual uses it, then it's gonna break his body and kill him. But what I really liked about like when he talked about like only gods, technically Spartans are godlike individuals because their augmentations and the achievements they do in battle is something a normal individual cannot do. So that was really cool. But what I really liked about was his comparison of like a Norse mythology into the armor. So like how Thor, you can even see in the Avengers, like I remember, what was it, Avengers Age of Ultron, where they kept on trying to like pick up Thor's hammer, but he just said, "You're not worthy." So that's basically the same thing they're saying, Installation is saying in this video about the Mjolnir armor. Only someone worthy or someone capable can wear the armor and use it. And if you can use it, then you have like powers and you can achieve so much. So that's really cool. I like how he made the comparison. And I did know about like the power source and like the huge like budget that takes to like create the Mjolnir armor. So I'm really happy to watch the cost of Mjolnir armor before I watched this video. But one thing I did not know was I did not know that he created this video after the 10 facts you did not know about Spartan 2 video, which I have on here, but I just watched this one first and then I was gonna watch the other one, but I guess according to him it was supposed to be the other way around, so I do apologize about that, guys. But I will check out the other videos and see what happens. But I keep on seeing the same book, Halo: The Fall of Reach book, over and over again, so I'm gonna have to check that out sooner or later. But anyways, this was my reaction to this video, and it was fantastic. So again, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed my reaction to this video, and also keep an eye out for more content. Check out my other videos on my channel and my other Halo lore and theory videos. And again, thank you guys so much for your continued support in this channel. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you guys are having an amazing day or night wherever you guys are, and I'll see you guys next time.